Hello friends and welcome to my channel. Friends, in today's video we are going to discuss one of the oldest literary genres, and that is satire. Friends, if we study the human history, then the man first learned to think critically, and later on, as the ages passed and literary genres developed, the man learned to write satirically also. Dear friends, this is how satire as a literary genre developed in the history of human existence. Now, let us discuss the genre of satire. So, etymologically, the English word satire is principally derived from the Latin word satura, which means full, and subsequently from the Latin phrase lens satura, which means a full dish of various fruits. So, dear friends, in this way, generally a satirical work is a full dish of various satirical devices that the satirist uses in his work. Right? Now, dear friends, Quintilian, the great Roman rhetorician, used the word satura in ancient times only to denote the Roman verse satire written in hexameter. And hexameter is a meter popular among the epic poets. But the point is, Quintilian used the word satura only to denote the Roman verse satire, although he was pretty aware of the Greek tradition of satire as well. But today, most of the scholars believe that the origin of satire is ancient Greece, and particularly the old comedy of Aristophanes, such as The Clouds. Now, dear friends, we find today all around us both literary and non-literary productions of satire. For example, we find satirical poems, fiction, plays, satirical newspaper articles, cartoons, movies, right? And satirical comments in WhatsApp and on Facebook. But we are the students of literature, and that is why we are expected to understand pretty well what a satire is from a literary point of view. Right? So, satire means a literary composition that uses irony, sarcasm and ridicule, to make fun of the human follies and vices and to correct them. This is a very simple explanation of what satire is. But then, dear friends, satire itself is a very complex literary phenomenon. It invites certain special questions to be explored and to be answered. For example, what is the psychology of the satirist? What is the philosophy of satire? What is the aim of the satirist? And above all, why satire at all? Right? So this leads us to think about the basic elements that we find in a satirical work. So I would call them the ingredients that contribute to the making of a satirical work. So what are the ingredients or the basic elements that we find in a satirical work? I am discussing that now. So the first element that we find in a satirical work is attack. The satirist attacks on whatever is bad, unfair, unjust, full of injustices, ugly. Right? So, the satirist attacks on a political policy or a social practice or educational system that is harmful to the mankind, and the satirist launches his attack upon that. Now, the second element that we find in a satirical work is judgment. The satirist judges, and generally objectively, that this particular political irregularity, this particular social practice, or this particular educational policy is going to be detrimental to the society. And that is why the satirist launches his attack on that. Right? The third element, dear friends, that we find in a satirical work is mockery. The satirist laughs at, the satirist makes fun of whatever is improper, inappropriate, bad, ugly in the political system or in the social practice or in the educational field, and satirizes whatever is improper or inappropriate in order to correct that. Right? So, mockery is not humor, because humor is innocent. But mockery is intentional, and its target is specific. Right? And its target, the target of mockery, is whatever is improper or unjust, in the socio-political scenario. Right? The fourth element that we find in a satirical work is catharsis. Now, what do I mean by catharsis? I do not mean here catharsis in Aristotelian sense, but I mean here by the term catharsis the general human psychology. Right? So when the satirist writes a satirical work, the satirist externalizes his own personal dissatisfaction or his own personal discontent in an artistic way. And in this sense, a satirical work is akin to an outcome of a cathartic process. Right? And then fifth element that we almost unfailingly find in a satirical work is desire for socio-political reform. And in this sense, almost every satirist is a dreamer. Every satirist is an idealist. He desires reforms in the socio-political scenario. And that is why he takes pen and paper and launches his satire. For example, Aristophanes' The Clouds is a brilliant satire on the educational system of the ancient Greece. Right? So, dear friends, from this point of view, if I use the medical terminology, then I would say satire is concerned with the medical practice of diagnosis and cure. The man of medicine finds a problem, a disease, an irregularity, and then tries to cure it. And in the same way, the satirist finds out a particular socio-political problem and then tries to cure the society of that particular problem or the politics of that particular problem. So the treatment of the satirist is satirical devices which the satirist uses and tries to awaken people against whatever is improper or inappropriate or bad. Right? So, dear friends, I have discussed 5 elements that we find in satire. Now, I am discussing the 3 great traditions of satire that are pioneered by the 3 great ancient poets. So in simple words, I would call them the types of satires. Right? Now I am talking about the first type of satire, that is Horatian satire. This kind of satire is named after Horace, the great Roman poet. And how is the nature of Horatian satire? Horatian satire is very mild, very witty, very playful. The satirist exposes human absurdities and human follies and satirizes them. So, dear friends, in Horatian satire, the satirist does have a great amount of sympathy for his victim. Alexander's famous poem, The Rape of the Lock, is a brilliant example of the Horatian satire. Right? Now I am discussing the second type of satire, and that is Juvenalian satire. Juvenalian satire is named after the Roman poet Juvenal. And what is the nature of Juvenalian satire? Juvenalian satire is harsh. It is aggressive. It is too often dark and violent. And here, generally, the satirist does not have sympathy for his victim. Here, human vices are exposed, explored, and satirized. Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift and Animal Farm by George Orwell are the brilliant examples of Juvenalian satire. Right? Now, dear friends, I am discussing the third type or the third tradition of satire, that is called Menippean satire. And this type of satire comes from the Greek poet and prose writer Menippus. So, what is the nature of Menippean satire? Right? Menippean satire satirizes the mental attitude of people. For example, the bigots, the misers, right? And Menippean satire launches its attack on incompetent professionals, right? So, how is Menippean satire? Menippean satire is in fact more judgmental than its Horatian cousin and less aggressive than its Juvenalian cousin. If I give you an example, then in Sanskrit tradition, there is a poet called Kshemendra, and he has written a work named Samaya Matruka, and it is an example of Menippean satire because it exposes several incompetent professionals and laughs at them. Right? So, dear friends, after discussing satirical types, I am now discussing satirical devices, right? And what do I mean by that? Satirical devices. So, I mean the stylistic devices that the satirist uses in his work. Or if I simplify, then I would say I am discussing the manner in which the satirist creates his satire, right? So the first stylistic device or the first satirical device is parody. And dear friends, here we have to be very careful, because parody is a word which is too often confused with spoof. But in fact there are differences between the meanings of parody and spoof. So what is parody? Parody means humorous imitation. But then humorous imitation of what and why? So parody means humorous imitation of a literary work with exaggeration in order to create comic effect, right? For example, Alexander Pope's famous poem, The Rape of the Lock, is a humorous imitation of Homer's The Iliad in order to laugh at fashionable men and women of Pope's times, right? Now, dear friends, I am discussing the second satirical device, and that is spoof. So what is spoof? Spoof also means humorous imitation. But here in spoof, humorous imitation means imitation of a particular literary genre, not of a particular literary work, but of a particular literary genre, right? And again I give you the example. Then The Rape of the Lock also provides an example of spoof, because it imitates the heroic style of the ancient epic or the classical epic, right? In order to create laughter. And that is why The Rape of the Lock is called to be a more heroic poem, right? So, the devices like invocation to the muse that we find in ancient epics can be observed in Pope's The Rape of the Lock. Invocation to the muse. Then combat. For example, in Homer's The Iliad, there is a combat between Paris and Menelaus. In the same fashion, here is the combat between the Baron and Belinda, men and women in the party, right? Then there is the intervention of the supernatural elements like sylphs and gnomes in Alexander Pope's The Rape of the Lock, because it follows the style of epic, and in epic tradition there is always the intervention of the gods and goddesses in the human world, right? So Alexander Pope's The Rape of the Lock is an example of spoof also, right? Now dear friends, I am discussing the third satirical device, and that is exaggeration. So what is exaggeration? What do I mean by that? Right? So exaggeration means to enlarge something in order to ridicule. To enlarge something in order to ridicule. Right? To make the trivial very great. Right? So again, if I give you the example from The Rape of the Lock, then describing Belinda and her locks of hair, the poet writes, now I am quoting Alexander Pope, this nymph to the destruction of mankind nourished two locks. So Belinda in the description is no more an ordinary woman, no more an ordinary human being. She is described as a nymph. And her locks of hair are not trivial things, but her locks of hair is a big weapon, right? To destroy man. See how Pope writes, this nymph to the destruction of mankind nourished two locks. So Belinda is nymph, and the two locks of Belinda's hair is a big weapon like Brahmastra, right? So this is an example of exaggeration. Now dear friends, I am talking about the fourth satirical device, and that is irony. And here I am talking about verbal irony, right? So what is verbal irony, right? So saying one thing and meaning another. Saying one thing and meaning another. This is what verbal irony is, right? For example, observing a very stormy weather. If somebody exclaims, what a cool weather, right? So this is an example of verbal irony. The person exclaims, what a cool weather, but it is not meant whatever he says. The meaning is opposite, right? So this is an example of verbal irony. Now dear friends, I am talking about the fifth satirical device, and that is reversal. And what is reversal? Reversal means to present something, right, opposite of the normal order, of the socially accepted or established order. Reversal, right? So if I give you the example from Fielding's novel Joseph Andrews, then it provides an example of reversal, because here it is Lady Booby, the woman who tries to seduce Joseph, the man. Right? So this is one example of reversal. One more example of reversal is George Orwell's brilliant novel, The Animal Farm. All the great ideals are forgotten at the end, with which once upon a time the Russian Revolution had taken place. Right? Napoleon, the pig, almost becomes human at the end of the novel. Right? And this is a very brilliant example of reversal. Right? Then, dear friends, sixth satirical device is sarcasm. Right? And too often people confuse irony with sarcasm. So let us understand what sarcasm is. Right? So to simplify, let me say that sarcasm is a satirical and bitter remark. So I have added two adjectives to describe sarcasm: satirical and bitter. Satirical and bitter remark. Right? For example, in his famous speech, Antony calls Brutus noble and honorable. Right? But the meaning is opposite. Antony means to say that Brutus also is a murderer of Caesar. Right? So, in sarcasm too, the meaning is opposite to whatever is said. But the difference between irony and sarcasm is that irony does not necessarily involve bitterness, whereas sarcasm has a considerable amount of bitterness in it. Right? Then I am talking, dear friends, about the seventh literary or particularly satirical device, and that is juxtaposition. So juxta means close, near, and pose means to put, to place. And so together, juxtaposition means placing two things together in order to create contrast. Right? The light and the dark, for example. Day and night, for example. Right? So there is a saying in English, all is fair in love and war. Love and war. But let me give you an example from Eliot's The Waste Land. So the beginning of Eliot's The Waste Land reads, April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire. So mark the words memory and desire, juxtaposition. Right? How? Because memory is something which is connected with the past, event, and desire is something which is connected with the future event. So memory and desire crucifixion and resurrection. Right? So this is how the poet employs juxtaposition in his literary or satirical work. Mark the juxtaposition in Gulliver's Travels. Gulliver's is among the Lilliputians, tiny people, and then Gulliver is placed among the people who are 60 feet tall. So here Gulliver himself becomes like a Lilliputian, right? So this provides an opportunity to the satirist, right? Swift here makes fun of the human mentality. When man is in the company of some inferior man, man takes pride in himself that I am superior. But when the man is in the company of men who are superior to him, then that pride naturally fades away. Right? So, juxtaposition and last satirical device that I am talking about is double entendre. What is double entendre? Double entendre means double meaning. And sometimes this kind of satirical device is vulgar or obscene, right? There is explicitly vulgar content sometimes, right? So the satirist sometimes uses double meaning, but then to use double meaning also reveals the talent of the satirist, right? The linguistic aptitude of the satirist. So if I give you an example from Hamlet, then Hamlet asks Ophelia, "Lady, shall I lie in your lap? Lady, shall I lie in your lap?" So one meaning is, shall I rest in your lap? But one more meaning does involve sexual innuendo, right? So, dear friends, overall, I have discussed satire as a literary genre. I have discussed, number one, the elements in satire. Number two, the types of satire. And number three, satirical devices. And I am very sure that this lecture will help the students to understand satire in a better way. So thank you so much.